We've probably got the longest title for anybody, hopefully, on this one. And we're going to try and set this one up so that we can have a sort of a debate around these sorts of things. So we're trying to set up a number of conflicting positions. I will do the introduction. My colleague Pete Lockhart here from Roke will take the first session, and my colleague here, Sarah, from Talus, will take the second session here to try and actually get you some contrasting positions in relation to things. We've put up a title here, Digital Resilience and Survivability, largely because I have trouble in saying it and my tongue doesn't work. And what does a cyber security argument look like in the automotive sector? So I'll do a brief introduction of what we are as AESIN, then we'll carry on from there. So this is what we've got, an introduction. That's me, Peter Davies. Risk and resilience of the platform. So that's looking at the resilience of a system that's from the platform perspective. Risk and resilience of the system. We've invited you to a debate at that point. So if you don't ask questions, I have to do so, and that's always bad. It doesn't end well. And anyway, they've told me they don't want that. And then we'll close up. And I've been told we've got to be finished by 25 past so that you can get into the main auditorium, because I'm not supposed to be the one that's causing a problem. So if that's not what you came for, that's tough, because we're locking the doors. And I've now got a TechWorks logo as well, so that's good. So the first thing I'll try and do here is actually introduce the security work stream from AESIN. So you saw what AESIN was, the Automotive Electronics Innovation Network. So essentially we have a security work stream out of that's been going now for about 2 years, I think. You'll find that most of the security leads out of the CAV programs, so the government's automotive vehicles, are actually in that list of people there. So you have a fairly authoritative set of people that are speaking in relation to this. We have 3 OEMs, we have research organisations, so we reach back into universities, and we have companies that are specialised in security and cyber security, and particularly in cyber physical systems of one sort or another, which I believe to be quite important. We've been doing conferences, and I've got to save the date for you there, of 4th of July, because I'm asked to do that one. So we think 4th of July next year will be our next security conference. We generally run those things as a themed event, so try and make sure that we actually get a proper discussion going in relation to those. And if you think you would like to contribute to that, feel free to contact me afterwards, and we'll see if we can work our way into that one. We also collaborate with the Internet of Things Security Foundation. Thank you very much for our invitation today. Obviously, we regard ourselves as an Internet of Things organisation, not just an automotive one. And we do try and make sure that where there are crossovers on things like patching and things of this nature, if there are lessons to be learnt between us, then we try and actually make sure that we give one set of guidance rather than several, which is why you'll see some sort of a similarity between the things that we're working on. These are my diagrams that go with this. So generally speaking, when we started on this, people were talking about cyber security into vehicles as components. So they were talking about this component here or that component here. We were having to do them at automotive security levels or safety levels, ASIL levels that went under the 26262s. And what we've tried to do over a period of time is to actually tease out some of the things that we think are important. So I've put up 3 of the diagrams. Hopefully my colleagues will talk about these to at least some extent, or if not those, then some of the things that are in them. So the one over there that says who's responsible for having a cyber safe system was one of the things that we worked out here. This was to do with actually looking at where are you actually having to provide the evidence that you're producing as part of your cyber case. And I know as you've gone through in the course of today, you'll have talked about various Internet of Things components. What we identified is we've clearly got people that have to make safety cases, and cyber, in as much as it exists, actually forms part of their safety case that they're having to make. We had a good discussion with the safety engineers, and we discussed whether it was likely they could be in court discussing the fact that it was safe except for the cyber bits. Obviously everybody fell about with laughter. That wasn't seen as something that was feasible. So it was quite clear that actually in everybody's mind the cyber was actually part of the safety case, not some separate element that was coming on. Second thing that we talked about was personally identifiable information, the sorts of things that you're going to see under GDPR. I think 3 years ago at the AESIN conference in Coventry, somebody put up a slide that was attributed to IBM that indicated that 103 exabytes of data a day were being generated by the automotive system, much of which is personally identifiable. And we clearly have a situation there where GDPR is likely to occur for those sorts of things. Everybody wants to encrypt this, and it is a mobile system, so we have this situation that if you cross borders, I'm doing a data export, or at least if I go from the EU to the Ukraine, I'm doing export, and it's a mass data export at that point. The third one that we identified down there was business advantage, with the observation from people like Ford that actually if they're not a data company, then they won't be a car company. People are actually starting to realise that this is about data and ownership of data, and the protection of that data is essential, otherwise you can't sell it. And the establishment of who can do what with it is also essential. So we saw these things as interesting because you had 3 different and conflicting cybersecurity requirements coming out of those. And very often these were occurring on the same processor, in the same set of things, so in the same element. And the security techniques we would normally have used were often contradictory to each other. Plus, it was evident that the evidence that you need to provide is different. So the evidence that you provide for a safety case is structured in terms of arguments. The evidence you might provide to say that I've secured my IT system is the sort of thing that you would see out of the IoT SF guidance and things of that nature, or the sort of thing you'd see out of Cyber Essentials or one of these things. Is completely different. It doesn't form an argument in that way. It forms we've done a slightly better chance. And the explanation I have to give to my managing director about why I haven't lost his data is completely different and oddly keeps me on my toes a lot more. The other 2 diagrams that we did here were essentially looking at autonomy levels, so looking at the engineering techniques, because we felt that this is an engineering structure. So you're putting this thing into an engineering environment, and if you were looking at ADAS, so you're looking at autonomy level 3, so just things that were giving you driver assistance, then these were things that we understood how they might follow from the kind of things that we've been doing up until now. Conversely, we felt that new security techniques were going to be necessary for higher autonomy levels, and when you started to introduce machine learning and that sort into your type of systems that you're looking at. And we felt that that was not an immediate problem in the sense that I haven't got lots of vehicles out here at autonomy levels 4 and 5 at the moment, but it was something that we had to work on in order to get an answer to what we should do on that. And the last one down here, I'll concentrate on the bottom diagram. Was concentrating on the various triangles that we saw in cyber physical systems. So the bottom one is actually concentrating on an aspect that showed that there were people aspects, there were digital aspects, and there were physical aspects, for instance, associated with a vehicle, and observing that the attacks that I'm doing can actually vector against any one or combination of those in order to have an effect against any one or combination of those. And therefore, analysing in isolation was of no use to us at all because it didn't tend to keep the attackers out. We came to this. We crossed out nicely the automotive system to make it clear that, as far as we're concerned, what you're looking at is an exemplar of a modern IT system here. And actually, we figured out that this was what we were looking at. So essentially, they're made up of components supplied by multiple vendors with legal obligations not to lock out other people, all the sorts of things you don't necessarily get in an IT system at the moment, all the things that you do get in many IoT systems at the moment. Though, oddly, it looks like the current IoT frameworks that we've got have managed to get monopolised by the Googles and the Apples and things. However, this one is having to do it open, and it's likely that we will see that sort of thing emerging if they become more significant going forward, I would suggest. We also looked at the fact that in the face of cyber attacks, it's not just good enough to go, okay, game over, we'll start again. You probably need to have a way of remediating that and figuring out how you can carry on in the face of those sorts of things. So this is the kind of world that we're talking about in the automotive world. We talked about how do we do this. Obviously, that didn't mean that we do castles. However, our observation was our talent and our techniques for actually doing Safety critical systems of this sort bear a striking resemblance to the way that we do castles and things. We basically do this, defend the trusted core, do the things that we're doing. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about ASIL components. We only know how to analyse, say 1,000 lines of code or 300 lines of code, but certainly not 5 million lines of code at a safety critical level that goes with that, which is very similar to this sort of thing. We restrict access, we analyse in depth, we expect to withstand a prolonged siege. Our observation, or my observation, I've done this from Thales obviously, we're a French company, that's the Maginot Line. It's famous for working well at the beginning of the Second World War, and that's cracked to Chevalier. In neither case did anybody actually attack it front on. In the case of the castle, they just cut off the water supply. In the case of the Maginot Line, they just went round the back. But you can see there, it's got all the same techniques. You've got ammunition tunnels. You could look at those as VPNs. Think of that as a TLS connection going in and out of your... nobody compromised that. You just ignored it. So this is what we now have. You'll see the text has stayed unchanged, but essentially we now have components. We have things that go out into your back-end system that's actually doing your maintenance. You're already breaching the boundaries around these sorts of things. And you're drawing things around components here that we are looking at different levels. So the top diagram that you can't read very well is talking in terms of ASIL levels that things have to do and identifying a fixed component that is supposed to operate at a fixed level. So let's imagine we've done all of that correctly and we've architected it and we've coded it correctly. So we've got none of this, 30 years ago, we knew not to do buffer underruns and overruns and all that kind of stuff. And we've analysed it. Is that going to fix your problem? So that was the first question. And this I'll feed to my colleagues. So essentially, we built those sorts of bits there, and that's how we've got into it. I thought I'd put up for you a size of the IoT, or projected size of the IoT market. This, I apologise, is a couple of years out. But what I like to emphasise on this is consumer electronics is coming in at number 5 on the hit parade. Every item above that has got safety critical components. So we talk a lot about what we're doing and how the phones are working and all the rest of the stuff as though that is the model going forward. Actually, what you're looking at is an acknowledgement that you're having to take liabilities for safety critical components, and you don't get to write a contract that says it's nothing to do with me if you're going to be killing people. Apparently that's not allowed. So looking at those sorts of things, I guess it's actually 5 out of 6 of the top are actually in that category. So we saw that as interesting. We hope that gives you some indication of why we think these things fit together. And I have 2 slides before I hand over to Pete here and allow him to progress. Obviously, we were the only people saying this, but actually I have here 2 slides from the Automotive Council. These actually talk about where various components and various capabilities are going to emerge between now and 2040. So we have a roadmap that is the best thinking of the industry and is endorsed and has been taken up to government of where we think all these things will occur. And alarmingly, a number of these things assume that we're well on our way to solving how we're going to do autonomy level 4 and 5 stuff now, because we must be, because we're planning on rolling it out quite shortly. So we have 2 slides that go with this that I'm sure if we ask nicely will be made available to people, because I believe these are in the public domain nowadays, that talk about how these things will happen. And all of these believe that you need cyber security as part of them. And all of these, I believe, are discussing the difficulties that you might have in an automotive system if you can't solve that. And with that, I will hand on to my colleague, who will talk to you about...
Why am I here? Well, we were at the TechWorks do about just over a week ago, and I was drinking a glass of wine, and Peter said, would you come and talk to the audience about cyber security? And I was somewhat suggestible, and I said yes. So he asked me to talk about the platform side. Can we defend the platform, and how does that affect the overall system aspect of it? Being a system engineer, my natural leaning is towards looking at complex systems and complex systems modelling. I'll have a damn good go at this and see if we can actually get some sort of debate going. First of all, how many people here from Automotive who actually are automotive engineers? So all people talk about ASIL and ADAS systems and all that. I'm sure a lot of the audience has hasn't really understood what's going on. Essentially, the world is changing, and we do believe that we're actually going into a world where with increasing levels of autonomy. So at the moment, a car with advanced cruise control, adaptive cruise control, is at level 3. Level 4 is when the car can navigate itself autonomously in the geofenced region, and level 5 is probably a vehicle that can self-drive in any environment. It's a little bit far-fetched, and the question is, when are these things going to happen? So I thought I'd just give a little bit about myself and about Rogue, and I'm sure everybody here knows Rogue very well. No? Who knows about Rogue? Oh, that's not bad. I was going to sack the marketing department, but you know. And for myself, I've been at Rogue for over 30 years. I was the CTO for about 7, and recently I've been involved with Peter on the AESIN security workstream, and also looking at the ADAS workstream, which is Advanced Driver Assist System. So that's the high-level AI and sort of navigation, all those sorts of sides. So I'm actually seeing from both sides. So this is Rogue, to sort of just try and actually credentialise the organisation. We've been in business for over 60 years, and we invented things like automatic number plate recognition. Hooray, well done guys, you did a good job there. And then we invented a congestion charging scheme and a sort of low emission zone in a city quite near here. So we really are on the side of the drivers, aren't we? But also we invented things such as 2G comms, 3G comms, and with Rogue Research we spun out a business called Vodafone. So a lot of activity in connectivity. But other areas we work is on sensors, or a much more sensors company. So naval radars, Hawkeye, who's heard of Hawkeye? Tennis, cricket, you know. And I should say it was never designed to be accurate, it was only never designed to be plausible. So that's a big secret about Hawkeye. But we're now going up the stack. We're doing a lot of AI, a lot of behavioural analysis. And that's one thing that was a big part, probably about half the business is concerned with cybersecurity, and we tend to come in from the government side. So we're very close into NCSC as one of our strategic partner there. We actually look after high-grade cryptos and things like that. So we've got a good reputation in cybersecurity, including inventing things like buy and spy cybersecurity, and also looking at big data. But the other part of the problem is about autonomy. So we are very much involved in creating high-levels, fully autonomous systems. So you may have saw that. Part of the Unmanned Warrior program. That's a fully autonomous speedboat called Blade Runner, going hell for leather up the Thames. And we've now got 3 of them working in formation. And the AI system and the autopilot system is all Rogue Matter developed. So that level of AI. And even more fun things, landing helicopters onto brand new Jaguar Land Rover Discoveries without scratching it. So that's the sort of thing we do. So we're a connectivity, autonomy, cybersecurity company trying to bring our skills and expertise into the automotive market. So, this is how I see the world progressing. So at the moment we're here, this is now. So we've got a market that sells vehicles to humans, and actually are controlled by humans. As the world progresses, we're now getting to a world where we have vehicles which are machine controlled, and eventually the market is going to move to a point where, at some point, we're going to market sales journeys to systems that are controlled by machines. This is this vision that sort of I've seen from Ford. It is a fully sort of mobility as a service. This is like a fleet of vehicles sort of driving around. But I do want to I have a little video here showing about how amazingly choreographed the sort of the traffic system in Mumbai is. There you have people, you have pedestrians, you have scooters, you have rickshaws, you have everything. They're looking in a perfectly orchestrated, choreographed way. And I do question whether these high-level AI systems will ever get to actually sort of go into those markets where it's dark, it's dirty, it's dingy. There's a lot of complexity into the environment. So I just wanted to make sure that we're talking about the right thing. And I think at the moment this whole area is very much on top of a height curve. We're all familiar with this, with the Garden height curve. We're sitting here, you can't see it, but that's the autonomous driving. And they're saying that's maybe 10 to 20 years ago, which is 10 to 20 years away, which is in line with what the Auto Council is saying. So we really want. So where are we now? We want to talk about now. So we're looking about cybersecurity of vehicles which are human controlled, level 3, potentially going to level 4. So that's where we are. So what is the? Oops, excuse me. So what is the current? What is the issue? Everybody's seen this slide. I'm sure we've fellow seen these guys' faces. The Miller Balasek hack, where they actually managed to actually localise and attack a specific Jeep Cherokee and affect it. And then you've got the press is coming up and saying that, well, that means therefore that in the future there will be heights of organised gangs committing ransomware attacks against vehicles. Is that really what we see as things going to happen? Probably not. Unless, but as an industry, we've got to respond to that potential threat. So, what are risks, threats, vulnerabilities, and impacts? This is a fairly typical IA approach to the world. So this is how we see the world. We look at a vehicle and say, well, that vehicle, that platform, has a defined requirement. So it has to do something, and it sits in a specific environment. And in that environment, there are threats. And within the vehicle and within the system itself, there are vulnerabilities. And as a result of vulnerability, there will be an impact. So we say, well, a risk is basically a threat times a vulnerability times an impact. If there isn't a vulnerability in the system, there's no risk. If the impact of the threat is low, then there's no risk. So it's and so we saw that with the discussion about the internet kettle. The fact that on vulnerability, researchers found vulnerability, but there was no actual impact, so no real risk. So what's it got to do with platform security? Well, who worries about platform security? That's a good question, which I'll try and answer. So, to be honest, at the moment, I don't think the consumer actually cares. I'm looking to buy a new car on the market. I went to the Mercedes dealer and said, what can you tell me about the recent relay attacks on the keys? Sorry, sir. Our cars are perfectly secure. There's never been such a thing. And it's not something that people actually are aware of. They demand connectivity and expect a high level of autonomy, and they assume that the security is a hygiene factor. It is delivered alongside with the safety. So we're all aware of the Euro NCAP ratings, which are about safety and nothing to do with security. They're just looking at the safety region, and you go in there and you look at something about an efficiency rating. So that's what you go. That's what you buy. However, as I said here, as I just confirming my statement, the recent research shows that despite the residents in the automotive community, current user awareness of cyber risk is relatively low, and that was a McKinsey report of February this year. So it's not in the public consciousness yet. But when we actually start looking at this, who is worried about cyber security? Well, in this particular case, it is the insurance companies. They hold the risk. They actually need to understand how to quantify the risks associated with the vulnerabilities within the vehicles. So they're the people who actually are actually holding the purse strings. And the important thing to say, this whole market won't progress because I believe, I think we all agree, that without security there's no autonomy. You have to have trust in that platform to move towards these high levels of autonomy. So the question really comes down to how do we create a market for cybersecurity? Now that is the question that we've been trying to answer. And I'm involved in a project called 5 Stars, which is Automotive Cybersecurity Through Assurance. And what we are trying to do, along with Myra, Ricardo, AESIN, and I've probably forgotten one, ourselves, is to try and actually sort of work out how do we come up with something that helps kick that consumer demand. How do you actually go when we go into the showroom? How do you get something that tells you about what is the digital resilience of that platform? Because as we will talk in a minute, the platform is only part of the overall system, but from the manufacturer, from the insurance company, from the vendor, it is important because it comes down to product liability. It comes down from the insurance issues. It's about quantifying risk. Because we don't really want to go down to this route where A product goes onto the market, requires then hits some litigation, requires retrospective legislation. There's also a lot of legislation already occurring that require regulation and potentially standards. We don't really want to go through that loop. What we want to do is come up with this, as yet ill-defined idea that we want to have some market pull for it. So at the moment, I'm not going to say that what we've actually created because we're only 6 months into the project. But what we have done, we've identified the stakeholders, insurance companies, the OEMs, the tier ones, the government, etc. Whole ran stakeholder meetings with them to actually try and actually start off with at least defining the scope. Because I mean, the trouble with these vehicles and these things, they are part of a complicated system. But so we need to actually narrow down the scope to at least give us a chance to say what it is that we're trying to protect. Is it just the safety critical systems inside a vehicle that we want to protect? Is that enough? I don't know. We're doing the research at the moment to say whether that's the case. How do we cope for a vehicle through life, from design all the way through to scrappage? So it can go to a number of different ownerships, so we're trying to manage that. And this is interesting, class. It's not about any particular class, but the vehicles are very, very different. So I could buy a very agricultural, low-priced vehicle from a manufacturer which has got very few ADAS systems on it. It's not particularly sophisticated, but when I do my cybersecurity analysis on it, it's fantastic because it's very unsophisticated. So how do we manage that as a rating scheme to actually give the confidence of the consumer in these more complicated vehicles without skewing the market? So lots of questions to ask. It's going well, but it's lots of things we're trying to address. So the next slide is basically just accepting that the vehicle itself is part of a very complicated supply chain. The actual electronics themselves are part of a complicated existing design process. You can go to a factory, you can actually sort of design the whole electrical architecture on their tools, ship it over to the production site, and the vehicle architecture will be delivered and developed. But also, these vehicles sit inside a complicated potential future mobility as a service system. So what do we want from our future mobility system? What do we actually want? We've been talking that we want safe. That's good. I think we want a safe system. I'd also like something that's convenient. I'd also like something that is affordable. So there's a big trade space we're trying to take this market through. I want it to be legal. I want it to be ethical. Legal and ethical sometimes are in conflict. I want it to be sustainable, maintainable, etc., etc., etc. And secure is important in that it links across to the safety critical side of it. But the most important thing I want from the system is it to be engineered. Yeah? So, and at the moment, I want a system, to be developed as a part of an overall system of systems, because that's what we actually want. At the moment, we're looking at the car comes out of the production line as an emergent property of a complicated production system. But as we actually move to the future with these connected vehicles, the actual system boundary gets very, very large, and at the moment, it becomes what we describe. At the moment, it looks like it's being developed as a virtual system of systems, so with no overall control, no overall authority, nobody setting the standards, nobody advocating for you guys about what you want from the car. Do you want to be safe? Do you want to be secure? Do you want to be convenient? Affordable? So we need that advocate here. So we move from looking at a system which is delivered as the virtual system, all the way up to the point where there is somebody who's actually in control of it and actually acts as the system authority. Now the question is, who will take that role in the future as the system authority for it? Do you think it will be? Who do you think it will be? Who thinks it will be the vehicle manufacturers, the OEMs? No. Who thinks it will be the road operators, the infrastructure providers? So who thinks it will be the tech giants, the Apples and the Googles of this world? Will actually sponsor that market. There's a few people there. But this is where we are. So, am I answering the question correctly? Talk about platform-centric security. Well, I think I'm trying to do the best I can, saying frame it within the timescales we are. That we're trying to give a system systems, vehicles which have definable levels of security, defined by some sort of rating scheme as yet undefined. That's about all I was going to say. And my apologies if it seems to go somewhat haywire, but it's because it's a very difficult and very complicated system issue. Okay.
Thank you, Pete. You to Sarah Haynes now, who will talk to you about how she's frightened about the system that it's going to become.
So as Peter said, I'm Sarah Haynes. I work for Thales Research, Technology and Innovation, based in Reading. I work for the security research team, architecting systems for securing data in future networks. So I've worked in like post-quantum crypto, that kind of thing, and I'm about to start a project in automotive looking at autonomous vehicles. So Thales is a global technology supplier. We work in these 5 domains. So we do things from air traffic management. We provide crypto that secures most of the banking transactions. We do rail signaling. So a lot of our technologies go into applications where safety and security are critical. So we're a global company operating in 56 countries with 60-odd thousand staff. So we do know what we're talking about. And in security, we have over 40 years' experience of securing the world's systems. So Pete gave a view really of the current automotive and near future. I'm going to talk about a very far future system, so a bit more IoT and where we think automotive systems might be going. So here is a vision of a future, of the future, a smart city. So we'll have smart transportation, smart energy, so smart grid, lots of very different systems all connected together with the aim of better using resources. So as an example, so we've got a smart leisure environment here. Consider that there's a big leisure event, so you've got extra people coming into this smart city. You want them, so there's extra traffic, more cars to manage. So you have the smart or intelligent transportation system that allows vehicles to be routed around efficiently, avoiding congestion. You can direct people to use the most suitable mode of transportation, smart parking to help cars efficiently park, and then even other industries like smart grid. So they will be efficiently managing the resources, prioritizing resources to make sure that it can cope with any peaks in demand. So this will be a fully integrated, hyper-connected system. And what we need to make sure is that it all operates harmoniously so that we don't end up here. So it's really important that we start thinking now about how we would cope with such an integrated, hyper-connected system. Because once we get to this stage, we don't want to have to try and bolt security and safety back into it. So Pete argued that he thinks automotive should be a directed system with somebody in overall control of it. I'm going to try to argue or put the case forward that with this future automotive system, I don't see how it can be directed. I don't see who would be owning it when you've got such a hyper-connected system that connects into things like smart grid. I'm going to talk a bit about some of the new types of attacks that are emerging and the fact that our current approach to safety and security isn't sufficient, which Peter hinted at a bit with autonomous vehicles. I think we need to focus on the data, on a data-driven approach, and we also need to consider remediation, which again Peter hinted at, that it's not, you can't just stop when there's an attack or something fails. We need to be able to continue to operate. Okay, so I'm talking about connected and autonomous vehicles, or CAV. A CAV is part of a hyper-connected bottom-up system with emergent properties. So currently, today's cars are already connected. So you have Bluetooth to connect to smartphones. They have GPS systems. They may even have connections back to the manufacturer for things like maintenance. As autonomous systems start coming online, they will probably need to offload some of their data processing to the cloud. So that's a further connection. There's also an increasing move towards having smartphone apps for your car so that you can remotely unlock them or switch on your air conditioning or heating remotely. So today's cars are already becoming connected, but what I'm talking about with the future CAV goes even further beyond that too. Instead of just applications for the single vehicle, we're now moving towards cooperative applications for safety. So, for example, your vehicle may be communicating with other vehicles in the road system for things like traffic information, alerts to hazards ahead, so pedestrians in the street, that kind of thing. And even vehicles might be operating in convoys. Your vehicle might also be talking to other parts of the road infrastructure, so if there's smart signage, it might be getting information about changing speed limits, that kind of thing. There's even, your car may even be connected into other systems that aren't related to automotive. So for example, Nissan is saying that your car will be a power station and will have solar panels that are able to generate electricity to feed back into the power grid. So the future CAV could well be connected into all sorts of systems. And your car will be making decisions based on data that it gets from these other systems. And you don't have control over these. So this means that the perimeter of your system is no longer at the bodywork of your vehicle. You now have to start to take into account other systems when you're doing a safety and security analysis. So it's a much bigger problem than just the vehicle. And this new automotive system is not subject to any single design vision, or you could probably argue any design vision. It's a bottom-up system with no overall control or no overall authority who owns it. And this system is constantly changing. So with autonomous vehicles, we now have machine learning. So that means that over time, the behavior of your vehicle may change. Also, when we're talking about vehicle-to-vehicle communication, the cars that you are connected to will change constantly as vehicles leave the road, go in different directions. So the system could be changing every few seconds. So I think in this context, we can no longer say that this future automotive system is directed. So with this new system, we will start to see new types of attacks. So the CAV is a cyber-physical system, as Peter hinted at. So there are three elements: people, physical, and digital, and attacks could focus on any one or more than one of these to have an effect in another one. So you could have a cyber attack on the data in the car that has a real physical effect, so the car could crash or even worse. And in the future, there will be few purely digital attacks where an attack on the data that has an impact on the data. So we need new security techniques to take these into account. We can't just use our traditional security techniques of patching software, because this is a much more complex system. We'll also see attacks where data theft is not the objective. So there'll be more globally motivated attacks, attacking where the objective is, for example, to reduce the share price. Attacks are likely to inflict collateral damage. So with the Jeep attack, Miller and Valasek said that it actually took them longer to specialize the attack to a single vehicle. So what this means is that a low-skilled attacker will be able to have a much bigger impact because it's easier to attack a whole class of vehicles than it is to attack a single one. So there'll be a lot more collateral damage. And also, to attack a whole system, you only really need to find a single weakness. So it's probably going to be much easier to have a very big impact. Most attacks tend to be found when the attacks are tested, when the attackers test out parts of their attack on systems. However, because of monocultures, reusing software, COTS, it's likely that attackers will be able to test out their attacks on completely separate systems. for example, healthcare. So it may not be as easy to detect these attacks until the attack happens. And the takeaway really is that a cyber attack will often rely on your unwillingness to confront the unthinkable. So just an example of what a future attack could look like. So imagine you're in a cab driving down the high street. A car 2 in front of you reports that a pedestrian has stepped out in front. But so for some reason this data is incorrect, so it could just be a fault in the sensor or it could be an attack. It doesn't really matter. But as a result of this false information, your car crashes. It's only a minor crash. Nobody's injured. So you could say that this is a fault. However, so your vehicle acted correctly, so there was no malfunction in your vehicle, but it still resulted in this collision. But what would have happened if your car had ignored the alert and it had been correct? So you probably would have hit a pedestrian. So actually, from a system point of view, this behaviour is actually better. So the benefits of a CAV and this automotive system really arise from the system scale and not from the perspective of a single vehicle. So it might actually be better in some circumstances to maybe sacrifice or allow some minor collisions at the expense in order to save the system, to allow the system to continue to operate. So some of the differences with this future connected and autonomous vehicle, as I've already mentioned, the perimeter for analysis becomes extensive because now other vehicles and infrastructure start to come into the scope of your analysis. There's no single design vision for this emerging system. And the system changes rapidly, as I mentioned, due to machine learning and also other vehicles. Attacks now tend to be data-driven, so the security emphasis really needs to be on verifying that systems are providing correct data, so checking that it's in range, maybe checking what with other information sources. Monocultures become a problem with cabs. So, for example, if it's known that all autonomous vehicles behave in the same way when there's a fault or an attack, then that could start to become an attack vector in itself. And it's important to consider the whole automotive system, not just individual vehicles, in order to avoid systemic failure. So what happens when there is an attack? Well, with autonomous vehicles, this becomes more challenging. So Pete mentioned that there are these levels of autonomy that come from SAE International. So there are 6 levels. 0 is no automation at all, and 5 is full automation. So at level 3, this is conditional automation, where the vehicle will be driving, but it's assumed that there's a human driver who maintains situation awareness and is able to take over if there's a problem. So in this situation, if there is a failure, then the reaction could be to hand control back to the driver. However, at level 5, full automation, there may not even be a driver in the vehicle anymore. So what do you do if there is an attack? The reaction can't be to, for 40 million cars, autonomous vehicles on the road, to pull over to the side, because then that's an attack on the whole system, and that's an attack vector itself. So remediation is very important for these future vehicles, and it's something that definitely needs to be thought about now. So in conclusion, I think the direction that future automotive systems are going in at the moment is that they'll be so extensive that it's no longer a directed system, that it's not clear who the owner is. There are new types of cyber attacks emerging where data theft isn't the main objective. And our current security techniques aren't sufficient for these attacks. And it'll be important to verify that systems are providing the correct data, either by correlating with other systems or checking ranges, that kind of thing. Remediation is important for these systems to make sure that they are able to recover in the event of some failure. And systemic failure must be avoided at the expense of an individual failure. Okay, thank you.
Sarah.